Hi, everyone. Welcome to our first webinar, working remotely during the COVID-19 crisis. And I promise I won't use this word too often because I think we've all heard a bit too much about COVID and coronavirus. Since we're all in it together and there's people around the world working remotely, what we're trying to do today is essentially provide you with actionable insights and experience from people on the ground who are doing team management or working themselves remotely, in order for you to be able to share this with your teams or inspire your teams to work better from home, at the same time ensure their well-being, because working in isolation is obviously something a lot of us are not used to. It's not something we chose to do. But as you will see from one of our speakers, there are people out there who actually have to do this because they have no other choice. So perhaps we can learn from their experience. The things we're going to talk about today are team management and their well-being. So let me introduce you to our speakers today. We have Valerie Rees from Alcumus, Chief People Officer, and we have Steve Schutz, who is the CEO of Astriid. Before I let them introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about their business, let me give you a brief presentation of KindLink. We are a tech company founded 5 years ago with a view to bring more transparency into the charity sector. It started with a charity solution, free solution that we still offer today, with the view of offering charities the opportunity to be more digital, be more transparent, manage their activities, internal or external. At the same time, about 1.5 years ago, we launched our corporate offering, which is a platform dedicated to companies that work with us to manage their CSR and sustainability initiatives. And in figures, we have somewhere around 1,500 charities that use our free solution around the world. We donated about £6 million worth of software to them last year. We fundraised about £1 million. Or they fundraised about £1 million to us last year. And we worked with tens of companies around the world for them to manage their CSR, engage with their employees, show the world what it is they do, the impact they have, the good they do in the world. Let me introduce you to our speakers. We have Valerie Rees from Alcumus. She's the Chief People Officer. Valerie, if you could tell us a few words about yourself and about your company.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. So Alcumus is a British-based company, albeit we extend our arms around the globe to provide software-led risk management solutions. So very much in the health and safety world. And we've just recently added North America to our portfolio in taking a business over there. So we are about 550 employees. And I think the angle that, hopefully I can share some insight on today is twofold. One is part of our business provides an HR consultancy service. So we'll be giving out lots of information to help their clients, their customers, and happy to share it with everybody. And then my other insight will come from an internal one, so how we are looking after those 550 people while we work through this, this crisis that we're in at the minute. That's it from me.
Fantastic. And then we have Steve Schutz, who's the CEO of Astriid. Steve, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and about Astriid.
Sure. Good afternoon. Thank you, Andrea. Good afternoon, everybody. So Astriid, an organisation which is a charity, UK-based charity. We help people who've got long-term health conditions to get back to work. Essentially, we look after two communities of people who've got a health condition, who've been forced to leave their work for whatever reason. They might have returned from they might have suffered a cancer. They might have a long-term chronic illness, rheumatoid arthritis, MS, ME, advanced hearing loss, glaucoma, diabetes, anything that stops them doing what they used to do. We connect that community to companies who are looking for skills and talent. Putting the two communities together, we sometimes get referred to as match.com for sick people who want to work. That's the shorthand for what Astriid is. Prior to that, I was a chief people officer myself as well for a digital marketing group, a company called Clicksco, a global group. We had 250 employees. So I have the benefit of having seen the perspective of being effectively an HR manager, a leader within an organization, as well as the perspective now of representing the views that people who wish they weren't isolated, but have been isolated in some cases for many years. And they've learned to work with that experience and learn to share their experiences with others.
Fantastic. So we'll definitely have a lot of insights from both of you. So why don't we jump right into it, because we don't want to dwell on the crisis. We are in a crisis. We want to try and help people to move forward, give them actionable insights and points for them to essentially apply whatever it is that people have done successfully onto their own companies or onto their work, their current work from home. So shall I just essentially jump into it? How do you successfully work from home for a potentially extended period? This is a question for both of you. What exactly is it that we might need? Do we need, is the technology ready for this? Do we need more coaching? How can we ease the burden on both employees and companies during this extraordinary situation we're in?
Sure. Shall I have a go first?
Sure.
Okay. So, I mean, in terms of experience of how to work from home for an extended period, I think that one of the things that I guess we've learned, and the candidates that I represent, say some of whom have been at home and forced to self-isolate for many years through their health situation, I think there's 3 or 4 things that they would say to you are really important that you do to establish the right type of environment and the right types of routines. So it's about environment, it's about systems, really. In terms of environment, creating a permanent workspace where that's possible. Now, that isn't always possible in people's different situations. I'm lucky enough that I have a room here in the house that I can call an office with a desk, and I can close the door on it when work is done. But for many people, that isn't the case. So if you're not in that situation, then creating a space that works for you, it's dedicated, and the context of that space is about work. So making that place as comfortable as possible, and then investing in whichever ways you can do to get the technology and support that you need to make that worthwhile. So one of the candidates I was speaking to about this said, look, yeah, one of the things is that you find is you try and make your space as comfortable as you can, like you would do in an office. But if it's cramped or if it's annoying, those things will really have a bearing on your productivity, your performance, and your state of mind. So fit yourself out with footboards, a box, something that allows you to be more comfortable. Because when you're working from home for a protracted period of time, you are in effect your own HR department, and you have to look after yourself and your own well-being. So creating the right environment is important, making sure it's not cramped or annoying in some way, but dedicated to work. And then establishing a routine, setting real work hours, a real structure with work that is prioritized and organized just as you would do at work, but is manageable for the amount of time you've got available. And here's where having an illness really has put some additional pressure on individuals who find themselves in this situation, that you might set yourself a number of tasks. You might set yourself 5 tasks to do during the course of the day. Typically, what people with a health condition will do is to prioritize those so that the top 2 tasks, which really must be done, are the ones that they'll obviously focus on first, and they'll organize their time and their energy around that. And what they've told me is that they have, in almost every instances, tried to identify when they are most productive. So if you can identify your most productive time, I happen to be a morning person. I like to get up early. I like to get on and do things. And then around about this time in the afternoon, I'm falling asleep. So hopefully I'll stay awake for another half an hour. But you have periods of time when you can work at your best. And so what you'll do when you're managing an illness is you'll manage your productivity so that you can tackle those 2 tasks at the time that you've got most energy and most strength. But then the other 3 tasks almost become a best endeavor basis. So you try and tackle those tasks, but if you can't, then you don't beat yourself up about it. You just recognize that they may become priorities tomorrow or the day after, but you reschedule that work. But you don't get too heavy on yourself if you can't complete everything that you set out. And that really works for people who've got a health condition, because you will wake up. I deal with quite a few people who have ME and chronic fatigue syndrome, and those people will say that they have particular periods of energy. One lady I talk to a lot has about 8 hours of work she can do a week, and she reckons that by the time she's done the 8 hours, that's her done, that's her exhausted. So she'll be paid for 8 hours. She won't be paid for any more than that, but she has to schedule that time in a way that makes it work for her. So what she will do is break down tasks into smaller tasks, so that if she wakes up of a given day and she really has no energy or very, very low amount of energy, she'll identify the task that must be undertaken today. She'll prioritize that, get as much of that done as she can do, and then be prepared to leave everything else. It's about managing the energy and that you've got to the time that you have available to the task that you need to deliver. So there's a couple of initial thoughts. Valerie, shall I hand to you for a couple more, and then I'll come back with some more afterwards if you want to, Andreea?
Yeah, no, that'd be great, Steve. And I think it's really interesting listening to you, because you've clearly got a very established way of helping. Oh, can you hear me? Sorry, I think my mic.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Yeah. So yeah, I think it's really interesting listening to Steve there, in terms of probably an established model for home working for people that that have to work from home all the time, or certainly regularly. I would say we're at the other end of this. We've had to move to a home working model, a full home working model, because of this crisis, and therefore it's been really interesting just trying to work through how up for everybody. So I would agree with everything that Steve has said, and I would probably add on to it the sort of how we've helped people start with the basics. So getting people to think about how they set themselves up, how they work effectively, how they do put those breaks in, how they do get up and get dressed for work, how they do get up and put makeup on. That those sound like very small things, but it's all about that mindset, because we're in this for the long term. So many of our teams, myself included, might work from home the odd day, maybe a couple of days a week. But we're now talking about a new world in which this home working model is going to be our life for the next, certainly 3 weeks in the UK lockdown, and who knows how longer. Therefore, setting up that routine now so it becomes a normal way of working, and having that break between work and home, because we're in our homes now all the time. So definitely putting in those definite breaks, as Steve said, to have some relaxing time to be your most productive. But I think those breaks between home and work, so putting your stuff away at the end of the day, if you've not got a designated office space, but you actually put it all out of the way so that work is done for the day. I think this is new for us, so probably where I would probably bring more insight into how we're getting to grips with it is on the communication and handling the social isolation, and how we help our teams with that, because it is so different. So I might be sort of going into the next sort of subject area, Andreea, but that's what I would probably say about setting us up now in terms of getting that good work environment, starting with the basics and then working from home best practices. And we've shared a lot of that with our teams. There's loads of stuff out there on the internet, loads of sources, and it's finding those best practices that work for us as a business, and then supporting every individual colleague too.
And I think
very much,
Andreea, just to build on that, I would absolutely echo those points. My brother was the founder of our charity, and he was very fond of saying, as a guy who'd had a very successful career, who then found himself age 50 diagnosed with cancer, stage 4 cancer, and unable to carry on working. He went from being valuable to valueless overnight, and he always made a point of saying that work was the thing that you got up and had a shave for. Got up and get out to have a shave, to not have a slovenly mindset, to not try and work in your pajamas, to not sit and work in front of breakfast TV and then the noisy radio, to stick to lunch times, to stick to routines as much as you're able to as well, and to embed around you the things that you need to be productive and be effective. And if you're not effective in the afternoon, as I'm not, then save your calls for then. You know, organize your phone calls, and then you can take those calls somewhere else. You can wander around the garden and take them, or sit in a different place to do them. But yeah, just work in rhythm with yourself, and that will be the way to optimize your performance.
I very much like something that you both said, actually. You know, you're working from home, but still make sure you stop at a certain point and you still sort of go back to your life. This is work, you're bringing it into your home, so you might be tempted to continue into the night, or not work the same hours, or just completely disrupt your routine. Whereas it's important to remember you still have to have your life, you still have to, you know, take a break, do the things that matter to you, spend time with your family now more than ever, because most of them will be there with you. But also, you know, getting not necessarily dressed up, but not being in your pajamas. That's a very interesting point, because many people will be tempted to just be comfortable. But does that sort of eat into our productivity? Probably. I see you nodding, Valerie. So, I very much like your suggestions. But if you're a team leader, so we've seen it from an employee perspective, but from a manager's perspective, how do you keep yourself and your team engaged? Because that's a sort of different skill set, isn't it? Keeping people that are working around the country or around the world engaged. Maybe they're on in different time zones. They're you know, dealing with different things. Technology might be different. How do you go about approaching that issue?
Yeah, I'm happy to kick this one off. We're on week 2, so again, I'm from probably quite a novice angle here, or a new way of working for us, this new world that we're in. We've got a team in Toronto, so I have a member of my team that works over there, so 5-hour time difference. And what we have is a regular catch up every week. So we've got that already in the diary. So whether I was working in an office or whether I'm working from home, the technology is there to do that. And we use, you know, there's so many ways of having that contact, isn't there? Whether it's Google or Zoom or Teams, you know, there's Skype. We're using all those methods that work right for us. So I think it's having that time planned in, so each member of the team knows when they're going to have their one-to-one, even though it's going to be over a camera rather than face-to-face. So that's okay. I think there's then the next bit about probably over-communicating in the beginning. So as I say, we're in week 2 now. Last week, we put in a morning and an afternoon check-in. So 9:30 in the morning with a cup of tea, let's all see each other and just talk about where we're at and what the priorities are for the day ahead. And then that 3:30 check-in to say, right, how's the day been? How's everybody feeling? What have we achieved? So 2 reasons there. One is to keep that productivity going, but also secondly, that communication and helping people not to feel isolated. You know, they'd be used to seeing people all the time in the office and passing by their desks and going to lunch with people. We've got people that live by themselves and they're now working by themselves. So they're seeing nobody else all day. So putting in those touch points, really, really important. And in addition to that, we set up new WhatsApp groups. We've got chat chat channels over Teams as well, which is the mechanism that we're using. So I'd probably say early days for us, but we're over communicating. And you know, as the leader of my team, really important that I am touching base every day. So I'm doing that through the WhatsApp group and then on the Teams calls with them as well. So that's probably what I would say in terms of how to keep, from a team point of view and a leader point of view, over communication in the beginning until it settles into a bit of a rhythm routine. So my team are already saying we probably only need to have 3 touch-in now, because we can talk about the day that it's been and we can talk about the priorities for tomorrow. So only a week and a half later, they're already feeling 2 a day is too many. But I know that all the teams across our business have team calls in the morning or the afternoon or both, just to keep that contact and that conversation going that helps us keep the business turning. I'll stop there and see if Steve.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, and absolutely identify with those things. I think there's I use a slide when I'm telling people about Astriid, when I talk about flexible working, and I persuade organisations, or try and persuade organisations, that we as an invisible talent pool are worth looking at as a recruit from a recruitment perspective. And I use a slide. It's come from a research organisation called FlexiWise, and it's UK data, but it says that about 86% of people want to have flexible working in their routine. About 63% have it already. So there's a delta 23% who want it but haven't got it. But when you ask younger people, millennial generation, Generation Z, the figure shoots up to 92%. 92% of younger people want that that feature to be part of their work. So there's this interesting situation there where you get what you wish for, and people have wished for this or something like this for a long time, and now they've got it. And the converse of this is they're suddenly presented with a situation where they've got concerns. And I think if I can characterize those types of concerns, and this would be the way I would be thinking about it and tackling it as a manager, is what will those people be concerned about? And I think the first one will be relationships, the relationship they've got with their boss, relationship they've got with their peers, relationships that other people have got with their boss, to want to know where they stand potentially in a pecking order. I think that leads directly into career development. I think that people will be worried if they're isolated, if they're not visible, if they're part of an unseen team. They'll be worried about where they stand and where they fit in a structure, and they'll want to be reassured and supported to understand that they are perceived well, that they're developing in the right way. And I think around KPIs will probably be the third bit. So I think it's relationships, it's career development, and it's around measurement. And in terms of measurement and KPIs, when I talk about people who are returning to work after a period of illness, there's a lot of rubbish, frankly, talked about adaptations. I'll have businesses say to me, well, isn't this going to require us to put ramps in everywhere, and don't we need to put disabled lifts in, and aren't we going to have to change the building with a lot of capital expenditure? And of course the reality is no, you don't need to do those things. If this is somebody returning to work after having beaten a cancer, or somebody who's returning to work after conquering an MS or an ME and being fit to work for the time that they've got available, you don't need to do those things at all. What you do need to do is to think about how you're going to measure their performance. And they want to feel as if that's fair, but so their team colleagues want to feel as if that's fair as well. So performance based around clear expectations, what it is the job requires you to do, what we're looking for you to deliver. And then the regular check-in that Valerie's just talked about, absolutely essential, and probably more regular check-ins than would otherwise be the case. That certainly for our candidates, but I think for anyone who now finds himself in this situation, having the ability to be regularly spoken to, updated with what's going on, and then outside of the group check-ins, as it were, having that one-to-one time as well, because those individuals will be feeling isolated, and the negative emotions that can be associated with that are things that we're very familiar with. The negative emotions, the isolation, the quiet leads to those situations, and so having time for the individuals as well becomes a really important element of the middle manager of the manager's daily routine.
You touched upon something that I thought was quite interesting: KPIs. So many of us are judged based on our KPIs, but also on our soft skills. Networking, for example, being one of them. And our personalities play a lot into our end of the year assessments, don't they? How do you feel that? I mean, hopefully, we're not going to be in this situation for an extended period of time. But if that were the case, how do you feel that will play into how people are being assessed and how they sort of perform themselves, knowing that the way they're being assessed is likely to change? I mean, now it might just come down to strict numbers, which in a way is easier for a manager, right? If someone is productive, then now it might be quite clear how they use their time, how productive they are. But at the same time, like I said, so much of who we are is a part of the way we're being assessed. So how is that going to change, if you will, the role of a manager or of an HR manager?
Go on, Valerie, do you want to go first?
I'm probably talking early days here, so we're probably quite a good double act, actually, aren't we? Because we've got both ends of the spectrum here. Early days for us in terms of, we absolutely, yes, are hoping that this is very short term and we'll come out the other side. So in that short term period, we've lots of different roles. So lots of different people doing roles where they're measured on different metrics. So whether it is our sales teams who are bringing in those new sales opportunities, whether it is my learning team who are developing learning materials, whether it is one of our auditors who would normally be on site delivering audits. So there's lots of different measures for different roles. If I give you some examples of how we are adapting, that might help to show how we're handling it in this world that we're in at the minute. So if I talk about our auditors, yeah, so we have auditors that go out and do assessments across many different businesses for their ISO standards. And normally those assessments have to be done physically in person at 8 hours on site. And in light of this situation, we've worked with the governing bodies to now agree that those will be done remotely. So we have been able to keep those, those highly skilled auditors working in demand, and we've still been able to serve industry with them being able to do those audits remotely. So the utilisation is still there, and there's their KPI, that as well as the standard. There's no reason the standard should be any different of what they're doing, but we're able to keep that utilisation high of them being needed and having work to do. If I looked at it from a sales point of view, so at the minute, we probably are seeing a sale downturn in terms of businesses maybe don't want to be committing at the minute until they know how bad this is going to be or how we're going to come through it. So therefore what we are doing is talking about account plans and doing that sales research so that when we come out the other side of this, we can ramp up and our business can then grow very, very quickly. So the measure there being the work that's going in, the inputs they're doing in order to have a plan to come out of this, as well as still chasing for sales opportunities where possible. If I give the third example, if I take one from an HR point of view, so I'm a learning and development manager who would be now normally would have been developing our next wave of selling skills workshops, for our salespeople. She can't physically deliver that, but what she is doing is looking at doing that virtually. So setting up, not just for the salespeople, a selling skills workshop, but also then across the business, we're looking at doing like this, some webinars, so some learning and development webinars. Wherever you are in the business, you can join in and you can still have learning and development. We're just doing it differently. And the really big thing about all of this is it's going to change the way we work in the future. From a company point of view and probably globally, this will really push how we can use technology and how we can work and learn and live in a very different way. So that's me just giving you 3 examples there of how from a measure and a KPI point of view, we can still do that in a very effective way and people still get great job satisfaction out of what they're doing too.
And I don't have a lot to add to that, Andreea. I think that when I do talk to companies about the measures that they might want to apply, one of the things I'm finding quite often is the appeal of bringing people from a diverse background into a team is that they themselves will change the dynamics of the team. If you bring everybody from the same educational route, if you bring everyone through the same channel into a team, then the chances are they're going to think many similar ways. One of the great benefits of diversity, it seems to me, is around creativity and innovation and bringing people with very different backgrounds to bear on the team. And if you do that, then you need to take a fresh look at how productivity, how performance is measured. And I think that in its simplistic sense, it comes down to 2 things. It comes down to outputs. So again, thinking about people who've got a health issue to manage, they can't always do the work that's required in the same conventional business hours as everyone else. So we will have people who, for example, have recovered or are recovering from a cancer, their chemotherapy treatment, their surgery, whatever it might be, the medication they're on keeps them awake for large periods of the night. And actually, for them, that's a great time to get something done. Now, from the team's perspective, that's also a great time to get something done because everyone else is asleep. So thinking about output as a KPI you can refresh, you can really think about that in a different way. How can this team member contribute something that no one else can? I've got one of my favorite is a young man with cerebral palsy. He was unable to get a job anywhere, but lived at home and surrounded by his technology, lived independently. And we were able to make a connection with him for the London School of Economics. And the LSE were having a real issue with cybersecurity. The young man is Rory, is at home. He's 29 years old, surrounded by technology. And we put the two together because Rory, with his technology surrounding him, was able to be online and log on at times that most other people wouldn't want to. Bank holidays, weekends, overnights, and so on. And he was able to do some of the shifts that no one else necessarily wanted to do or were able to do. So you can use the benefits that these people bring and that home working brings. You don't have people having to commute anymore. You can have people working when it suits them, to that point about their most productive periods. And finding ways to match those performance measures against those outputs is critical. The soft skills is the big issue. How do you help people develop their soft skills? And that's a very different matter.
Well, there's also the issue of the engaging with your colleagues on a personal level, isn't it? The water cooler casual conversations that we all have over coffee, or just sort of that engagement that you have when you sort of work in the same room with someone for 8 hours every day. Is that going to be a problem if this turns out to be an issue that affects us for a few months? Is that going to reflect in any way on the productivity or on the overall team performance, do you feel? I mean, I'm asking this, and I'm pushing this point because I'm originally a journalist, and for me, engaging with people is such a huge part of what I do. And I mean, this is one example of journalists, spending time with their sources in order to sort of get the relevant information, which is not necessarily something you do over a video call for half an hour where you have question answer. And that's very formal. Talking about the softer side of things where you engage with people for a different kind of output. And again, journalism is one example. There's a lot of other ones. So is that going to have to change, or will we see an impact on such industries at the end of the year, do you feel? Valerie, you're muted.
I thought I clicked it, sorry.
There you go. Yeah. Thank you.
I think things will absolutely change. I think we will all learn a lot from being forced to work in a very, very different way, and hopefully a lot of good will come out of it. We'll all learn that we can do so much more working in different ways. We'll all be a lot more technology savvy, that's for sure. And using methods of technology that we haven't used up to now. In terms of that engagement and that social interaction, I'd say for us it's early days, but what I do see is everybody really embracing it. And I think Teams, certainly for us, has become already so well used in setting up these team meetings every day, making sure that people's voices are being heard, making sure people's well-being is being checked in on. So I think there's a lot going on locally where teams and different groups are definitely getting together. What I see now is it's starting to push a little bit further. So I'm already hearing chat about, shall we have lunch together over Teams? Shall we have a lunchtime quiz? Shall we have an evening quiz? And then we've seen some of our business areas do things like, right, at 6 o'clock, we're all going to take a picture of having a drink, or come on Teams and we've all got a drink in our hands on a Friday night. So trying to introduce a social element just in a very different way from being physically in the room together. And I would say so far that is working very well. Keeping that momentum is going to be more important than ever, because it probably feels quite novel at the minute. And I think for all of us getting our heads around, certainly as I say in the UK, this is a minimum of 3 weeks, is going to need us all to keep that energy and feed off of each other, rather than it becoming just something, just a process, just something to do. It's got to be something we all feel we're getting something out of. I think what I'd add is then what's the business's responsibility, so how we support all of our colleagues. We have a communication forum, which is the intranet, so our own intranet. And I'll be really honest and say it hasn't always been very well used. So people have not tended to see it as a great place to go to find out information. In these last 2 weeks, we have pushed a lot of information that way about setting yourself up to work from home, looking after your mental well-being, looking after your financial well-being, some competitions. We've got a step challenge going on, which we set up at the beginning of the year, not just because of this issue, but when we're promoting that. So we're already seeing more traffic go to the intranet where people are thinking, I'm going to have a look at that article. So we're trying to find things that matter to people, and letting them know that we do care, and we care about what is important to them. So I suppose that's me covering two angles. One is the social side of it, and how we do that as a normal way of working now, but also our responsibility as a company to make sure that we are providing information to help all of our people as well. And I'll stop there and hand over to Steve.
Steve?
So I'm 56, and my era, the thought of not being able to communicate with each other, not being able to work together, would have been a complete anathema. Would have been something that would have been terrifying for anybody who's in the communication business, or who just enjoys socializing with other people. I suppose my sense of a younger generation, and I have two daughters, 34 and 21. As I see what's going on in their worlds as well, and clearly their expectations of work and the world that they live in are very different. And when I talk to the candidates that we look after, the people with long-term health conditions, I ask them, how do they communicate? Back to that young man, Rory, with the cerebral palsy. He has a whole host of different mechanisms and ways that he communicates. He has lots of friends. His friends come to him rather than him going to them. He doesn't particularly like going to the pub, even when the pubs were open, but he has ways by which he stays in touch with them. And socializing on the internet is something that's much more akin to that generation than it is, for example, to mine. So whether it's WhatsApp, it's Skype, it's Zoom, it's Discord, that's a tool that's used by quite a lot of people. Socializing in different ways, as Valerie was saying, playing online games with friends. One of our team liked to have a virtual cocktail party. I think that's the same thing as you've described, Valerie, but at a certain time, everyone goes and pours themselves their favorite drink, and it's a topic of conversation. They organize watch parties as well. You all watch something at the same time. Poetry reading, acting out plays, sitting and chatting, starting online book clubs. They're all things that keep people active outside of work, but keep people communicating and developing relationships, which is what my generation would have done by being in the office together. I think if you want to turn that slightly more into a sort of an L&D challenge, a learning and development challenge, then exploring audiobooks and podcasts, again, technologies which are available now, which would not have been available 20 years ago, great for understanding new perspective, new angles. And when you make that a feature requirement almost of people's working week, so that when you have one of those breaks or you have one of those check-ins during the week, actually it's someone's turn to talk through the podcast or the audio book they've just been challenged to read, and bring new ideas in, back to diversity and inclusion, back to bringing in a new source of ideas. You can use that as an opportunity. And I would have to say, and I guess I would say this, wouldn't I, as a charity, but the other thing that I think is very different with this generation, from my generation, is a much greater preparedness to volunteer. I see it with our charity. Majority of our volunteers, and we have well over 100 who help our charity from all over the world. Many of them would be based in the US, even though we're a UK-based charity. Majority of those would be people in their 20s and early 30s. And they've seen this issue. They've seen this issue of people and might well have touched their particular family. They've got a family member who's no longer able to work because of a cancer that they've had diagnosed, and they're emerging from, or a parent perhaps, or even a friend. Young people get ill too. But people who then say, I want to do something on top of my work life to give back. I want to find a way of creating real meaning in my life and associating myself with a cause that gives me a benefit. And that is something that, again, I think helps people to reestablish that sociability, because they're doing something in which they collectively believe. And that's a really important part of every business organization today.
Fantastic. I'll pause for a second to remind people that they can ask questions. And I saw one on Slido. Do you have advice for supporting employees who are working from home but forced to combine this with childcare during the corona crisis? Very stressful, they're saying. I can imagine.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's so early days. I think what we're doing at the minute is being very supportive and sympathetic to that, and accepting it's probably going to be quite normal at the minute that you know, the kiddie winks could be running behind you when you're on a conference like this, and we're okay with that, because we're all adjusting to new norms now. Where we have got people that are saying, look, my kids are an age where this is really difficult, then we're looking at how can we be flexible. So how can we, I probably picking up on what Steve was saying, how can we work in a different way with them so that the productivity is still there, the output is there, they're fully committed, we know that, you know, we've got great people that work in our business, so let's help them make this work, rather than to say, actually, this is really difficult. And that might mean, so we've got a working couple, for example, that are in our business. So 2 people work in the same area and they've got children, and between them, they're saying this is really difficult. And we've agreed that they will cover a 7 till 7 day, so that they can take turnabout of looking after the kids while the other one is working. It's a longer day than normal. And they're still producing the same amount of productivity, and actually hopefully we've got more goodwill because we're showing we want to help. You know, there's nowhere they can go and put their kids, they have to be with them at home. So it's how we can help and how we can do it. So that's probably my sentiment on it, but also an example of how we've helped our people with it.
I saw something earlier this week. It was a sort of a how to do it and how not to do it. 2 letters. Other people may have seen them. I think it was on LinkedIn. And one was a real set of instructions on how you should work from home, and how if you needed a break, you should you should put a note on your on your team's message to say, look, I'm away for 15 minutes. I'll be back in 15 minutes, and then you report back to duty and you answer the phone after 2 rings and all that sort of business. So real micromanagement. And then a lovely letter from a chief executive, which was, look, this is going to be difficult for everyone. We're finding our feet. We're all discovering. We know that we've got people who've got children in the background. If there's a stand-up that's been called and your kids are with you, bring them into the stand-up. Actually, it's really good for all of us to know what is going on in each other's lives, as well as the work that we do. You know, we're going to get to know each other. We're going to form bonds and relationships that would not otherwise have existed. Kids don't enjoy meetings, strangely enough, and actually after a while, pretty soon they get fed up with it and go off and go and pull the dog's tail or whatever it might be. But they, you know, in the first instance, just bring them in. We're all people, we're all real people, and we should recognize that we've all got those sorts of challenges to manage. Yeah,
just picking up on that, Steve. We had a great example this morning where we had a Teams meeting, and one of the managing directors has got 3 small children. It's their first day now at home, and their youngest, who's 4, wanted to come and sit on his mum's knee, the managing director's knee, while we were having the discussion, and we all went with that, and we all talked to Connor over the Teams meeting, rather than make anyone feel awkward, and certainly make our managing director feel awkward about it. And you're right, he got bored very quickly and he disappeared.
Well, you remember how it used to be the case that people looking to get a promotion would have to introduce their spouse to their boss, and you know, it'd be a whole thing, whole parading of the family. We're pretty much back to that in a different way. Now we all accommodated, and our pets are a big part of our lives now. So that's, if you will, a very soft and different approach to work, isn't it? And the way we engage with our people, because it used to be the case that the personal life would not be a big part of our job, of our everyday job. People didn't really talk about it. You know, it was maybe saved for the Christmas party, whereas now, you know, we have to embrace the fact that we're much bigger than our jobs, or that our presence in the office, we're this whole different being that has to be accommodated by the company and by our colleagues, because otherwise we just can't make it work. And actually, I'm seeing a question in the chat now that it touches upon something I was going to ask, mainly to Steve. Volunteers, how do people volunteer now? How can they volunteer remotely? What advice do you have for that? And since we're talking about volunteering, I think we can also touch upon donations right now for charities. Is there an impact? Obviously, through what our work at KindLink, we're seeing a lot of unrest in the space, if that's a word for it. I don't want to say stress, but it is stress, because people are putting a lot of projects on hold and prioritizing perhaps other things. So if you could tell us a little bit about that, Steve, that would be great.
Sure. And to the volunteering point, and I see that Della, who asked the question, is based in Florida, so that would motivate her question, I imagine. And it might well have come from that reference to our volunteers. So we're a charity. Obviously, we operate on a Salesforce platform. Salesforce are one of our biggest corporate partners and our biggest supporters. And it's there that an awful lot of volunteers who volunteered for us will work. Some of them like to get involved in, I call it lycra-based activity. So whether they're running, jumping, cycling, swimming, triathlons, Ironman, they'll be raising money for us and doing that because they feel that the cause that we represent is one that's close to their heart. Like I say, because possibly they've lost somebody, or they've seen somebody go through a decline because of the absence of work. So it touches them for that reason. But then we get a lot of professional advice and help as well. So Yes, I've had, for example, our whole brand book was put together by a team of people, mostly Salesforce, but some other businesses as well, where the brand book was, the rebrand, the refresh was done remotely from the US for us in the UK through all the correct processes, the consultations, the research exercises, the A/B testing and so on. But managed for us by a group of people who just brought their professional skills to bear, creative project management, execution skills, brought them to bear as a team of people to help us. Last week, there was a workshop, again in the US, it was in Salesforce, and the workshop title was around video case studies. We wanted, I feel that if you can get a candidate to record a short video, 45 seconds, that tells their story, tells their situation, and encourages people to respond to Astriid, to get access to them, then that video could be, would be a very powerful way of getting people into jobs. 45 seconds, you work quite hard to tell your story. So we put the brief out to a workshop to say, how should you structure that? What should that 45 seconds contain? If this is a series of sample CVs, how would you turn those into videos that tell the story in a compelling way that will get the response that you want? And again, that group of people, and they came from all sorts of different facets of the business, blended together as a group to bring their professional skills to bear. But I have vacancy opportunities for volunteering opportunities for people to help promote what Astriid does, recruiting businesses, recruiting candidates, telling the story, helping us with assets that are on the site, helping us with guides. This sort of guide is a guide that's going to feature on our site, and that's written. They're written by volunteers. So those would be the ways. And then just a quick word on donations, Andreea. You're absolutely right that last year, if I think about our donation sources, 75% would have come from those events and lycra-based activities. None of those things are happening at the moment. So I'm going to be significantly down on our revenue because we provide our service for free. And so donations are going to become increasingly important to us, as are the philanthropic donations that come from funds and foundations, trusts and foundations. So it is charities, all charities. There are 165,000 small charities in the UK. All of us are going to be struggling with those donation issues as clearly people start to prioritise their own needs. Charity begins at home.
And since we're approaching the end of the webinar, I have one final question. I think we've lost Steve. And a lot of people have dropped off and then rejoined, so that we might have a technical issue again. Apologies for that, everyone.
Sorry, Andreea, I'm back
actually, no worries, Steve. We were waiting for you. Final question. Is this a chance for CSR, HR managers to redesign their strategies? And will the current situation change the way companies manage their workforce?
Yeah, again, Valerie, if you want me to go first on that one, I think there is there's a couple of really important things that COVID is going to introduce into the equation. The first is that for any organisation that in the future says to us, oh, we don't do flexible working, I think I'll be able to call them out, because many organizations that might have been in that position before, that they felt that this was something for other people to do but not for them, must have found a way around this problem. So they must have dealt with it. Now, they might have bad experiences and they might be then looking for help to improve those experiences, but there won't be any organizations out there that won't have experienced it. But the second thing, is on an individual level. For those people who've had to self-isolate for 2 weeks, for 3 weeks, for 12 weeks, I think I'd like to be able to talk to them in the future about individuals who've self-isolated, use that term, for 10 years or for 15 years or for 20 years, who for reasons of health, no fault of their own, have found themselves in situations where they can't go out, they can't travel to work, they can't do all the things that other people do, and so have found themselves being isolated in that way. And I think that I hope that I will find a much more aware audience of hiring managers, of recruiters, of HR directors and chief people officers who recognize the impact that isolation can have on an individual and want to do more to help as a result of that. Valerie.
Yeah, I'll add really briefly to that, because I can see that the time is ticking there. So I would agree with everything Steve has said, and I would add on to it. I think it will change how we work. I think it will have pushed technology so far that things that would have not been thinkable will be okay. So, for example, having a client meeting not face-to-face would not have been thinkable before. It will be okay to do that, because that will become a new norm. So to be able to have business meetings with external people, I gave you the example of the auditors now being able to do remote auditing. It will push how we can do things very, very differently. And really importantly, that we do learn from that. So yes, absolutely. I think we can already see it's challenging our thinking, and we are realizing that technology is there to help us work in a very different way. And what wouldn't have been okay a couple of weeks ago is certainly okay today. So completely agree.
Fantastic. Thank you both so much. I think we would have had a lot more to talk about. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. Reminder for everyone that there's a poll in the chat for our next webinar, potential topics. Thank you both for joining us, and everybody that's joined us from literally around the world. Reminder that this webinar will be covered in our magazine, KindLink Global. So all the actionable insights will be summarized. Everything that has been said, discussed today, we will have ready for you in an article over the next few days. Stay tuned, because we will have a webinar. Sorry, again, I'm getting used to this whole online thing myself. And in the meantime, you can read everything about what we've been up to and what our speakers have been up to on kindlink.global. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.